Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the University of Calgary MacDeployment Conference Day 2. We're just going to get started here while attendees start to trickle in. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary, where this conference is hosted, is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So, we wouldn't be able to present a free conference to you without the generous help of our sponsors. So I'd like to recognize the University of Calgary IT Operations, JAMF, Repeata, for providing funds necessary to present this conference to you guys. So a few ground rules before we start. The bathrooms are located hopefully somewhere within 50 meters of your person. We want to make sure that you've joined the MacDeploy Slack if you haven't already. For Q&A and chat, please put questions in the Zoom Q&A box or on Slack. We'll see both, and we'll be kind of collating those for later, either panelist preference, answering during or after. And the code of conduct. The MacDeployment Conference is committed to diversity and to providing a harassment-free conference for everybody. We encourage all speakers and attendees to treat others respectfully. All participants have a right to a safe and welcoming environment without distinction of any kind, such as gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, national or social origin, or other status. Please don't share disrespectful, malicious, or sexually oriented items at the conference. Thanks, guys. So this morning's, the rundown of this morning's presentations, we're going to run for about 3 hours, and then we're going to break for lunch, at which point we'll have about a 7-hour gap just to accommodate some of our overseas presenters. So the first, as you can see, under Wednesday, June 2nd in the middle there, is Armin Briegel, who is going to charm us with his unique sense of humor and give us an online presentation about presenting online. After that, we're going to have Toronto's own David Yoon, passionate lead for the MacBrained YYZ meetup group. He's going to provide an extremely helpful course on building macOS virtual machines for free, which I'm personally very excited about. After David, we're going to have a 25-minute break, so you can avail yourself of the Kumo Space rooms. I believe we still have them open if you want to go socialize. If not, just take a break, relax, stretch. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have JAMF's own Christina Gremillion and Tracey Joyce teach us how to use MDMs to support flexible, student-centered learning. And then to finish off the morning, we've got Ben Toms, who's going to give us some expert guidance on administering Apple Silicon. I've seen his slides. They look pretty fantastic. So hope you guys are ready for that. So before we hop to Armin, the YouTube link, we have YouTube up for everyone. So you can go and access pre-recorded sessions there. And let's go over to Armin. If we want to throw the spotlight on him. Armin Briegel's been managing Macs and their users for nearly 30 years and probably held most technical job titles at one time or other. He's worked nearly 10 years, both at Apple in Germany and in the US as a systems engineer and consulting engineer. Then he put theory into practice as a system administrator at University of Southern California. He currently works as a consultant for the Netherlands, writes on his weblog, scriptingosx.com. You should go check it out. It's great. I go there every Friday. And he's published 5 books for Apple administrators, 2 of which I have, and they're fantastic. So welcome, Armin. This, I guess, is Armin's favorite Mac product. You wanted to tell us a little bit about that one?
Yes, well, I was told I should have this prepared. So when you asked that question, what my favorite Mac product was, it's kind of like choosing your favorite child, I guess. But this was the first laptop that I was able to use productively as a full-time desktop replacement. I don't think I've had a primary desktop since this PowerBook. And so this was the Lombard. So I think it was the 98 or 99 PowerBook G3. That was the one that I got. And it served me well for several years.
Awesome. And did you want to do Q&A after the session?
Yes, we'll do it afterwards.
Okay, wonderful. I'll turn it over to you if you want to take me off spotlight.
Thank you. So I just have to convince my computer to listen to my clicker. This is wonderful. My presentation today is about an online presentation on presenting online. When Anthony told me the topic for this conference was things we learned in the pandemic. I'm like, well, there's certainly a ton of stuff I've learned in the last 18 months, but the technical stuff I probably would have learned anyway. The thing that I had to deal with as somebody who presents fairly frequently is, how do I present online? And I thought I'd put those thoughts together and the things I've learned on that. And I don't believe like my experiences here are the end all be all on this. Every time I participate in one of these online conferences, I'm hugely impressed by what other presenters do and how they deal with the challenges of presenting online. So this is my perspective on what I figured works for me. So why? Well, of course, 2020, the corona pandemic hit the world, and we all found ourselves suddenly working from home. And suddenly confronted with these wonderful tools. And I say that both cynically and in admiration, because they have enabled so much in the last 18 months. But of course, we all love to hate them as well, to present and share and do our meetings. Now, you might say, this is 2021, the vaccines are rolling out, depending on where you are, faster or slower, but the vaccines are rolling out. Soon we will be able to travel again, possibly worldwide. Won't we be able to meet again? Is this just a temporary thing? And if not in 2021, then hopefully in 2022. To that I say, I believe that remote is here to stay. Probably not as absolutely 100% remote as we have experienced in the last year. But many people, many companies realize that work from home and remote work is a valid solution, a valid thing that we can do. It requires less travel, less commute. Companies can have smaller offices because people work from home all the time. And for the things like conferences, it simplifies international participation, like me sitting here in the Netherlands, in the sunshine actually, and participating in a conference in Calgary. I would have loved to be there in person, of course, but the logistics of traveling may or may not have made that possible. So I think in my experience, there are three different kinds of presentation. The first one is live, on stage, in front of a room. The second one is remote, over a tool like Zoom, Teams, WebEx, all the others. And the last one is actually just creating a pre-recorded presentation. And I'll talk about all three of those. And they're probably also not as separate as it may seem. And of course, the presentations will be prepared differently and held differently depending on how big your audience is. It's different if you have a small room with just a handful of teammates, or maybe a few people who are your customer, versus a medium-sized room, which is a local admin conference, or a big conference with potentially hundreds in the audience. You will present differently and prepare differently. When I start working on a presentation, I do it in a text file, in notes. Are you getting the sound? Something simple, just a plain text outline of what you want to talk about. Some topics and some subtopics, maybe note the demos and other things you want to have in there at that time. Take these bullet points and turn them into text slides. Again, just a title and some text for each slide. Or maybe just a note, this movie goes here, or this demo goes here. At this point, I already start practicing. Here, in my living room, this is where I start talking through the slides as if I were presenting, to figure out how the workflow works, how the timing works. Do I need to add more slides? Do I need to cut stuff down? While you're doing this, you will notice I can replace this slide with images, or an animation would really support what I'm talking about here. Or maybe I want to put a movie here. Do this iteratively, over and over again. And every time you do it, the slides get a bit better, the presentation gets a bit better, and you're automatically starting to memorize. Keynote has a great way to rehearse, Keynote has a great way to rehearse presentations, and it's actually called Rehearse the Slideshow. You can find this in the play menu, Rehearse Slideshow. I use this so often, I actually go to the toolbar and add it to the toolbar. I use it all the time. And I recommend you do that too. When you select that, it will actually send you to the presenter mode of Keynote. So usually that's the mode that you see when you're presenting on the second screen. On the first screen, you will see the big slides. And you can work through this. You will see the presenter mode even if you're on a single screen like a laptop. And you can work through this and work through your presentation. You probably want to show the elapsed time instead of the current time of day. I think that is more useful. And if you find something while rehearsing in a slide that you don't like, you just hit the escape key and it will bring you right to that slide to edit, and then it should just work.
Just going to jump in, Armin. If you want to stop sharing and reshare with the audio, we've got time.
I will do that because I have more videos later. Hang on.
Okay.
Thank you. I actually have, did that change anything?
I haven't heard any audio on this one.
Yeah, no, there isn't any audio on this, but I think I enabled it without needing to jump out.
Wonderful.
Learn your presentation tool and the remote management tool. It's actually on a slide later. And I practiced this, but in the nervousness before I started, I forgot. There's two philosophies when you do demos. You just saw I did a pre-recorded demo in this one, which when you're doing remote, I think is way easier. There are, of course, advantages to recorded demos that you probably won't have failures because you record as often as you need. So the demo just works. And it will also be more seamless with the rest of the presentation as you're clicking through the slides. The downside of doing a recorded demo is that they feel less authentic. You will seem and appear and probably be more confident about what you're demoing when you do it live. Like Joel Rennick here in MacSysAdmin 2017, where he actually built a tool to get a Kerberos ticket live on stage in Xcode, which was an extremely impressive demo. So these will work better, but you have to practice them. You have to be confident. I think especially if you're trying to sell something to somebody, the live demo is way more convincing. And by selling somebody, I don't necessarily mean a sales pitch, but sales pitches can be internal as well if you want to convince somebody that a certain tool or a certain workflow needs to be done. When you're presenting on stage, I always love and hate the projectors. Projectors have to light up a large screen, and in the auditorium, the lighting may have to remain on for various reasons, and you have to work with the projectors. Low contrast is what you have to deal with. And watch this presentation running here, where I present also on MacSysAdmin, and watch how the dark slides and the slides with a light background work better. Dark colors are always different. You want dark text on a light background, in other words, light mode. And when you highlight something with colors, you want to use a few high contrast colors. Of the Spanish in 1574. This is a very dark picture. I'm sorry, but it was a very dark time. So that's 400. So that's 444 years ago. Talk about holding a grudge. So when you're presenting on stage, you have to deal with projectors and large screens. Use high contrast colors. Black text on white background always works. White text on black background kind of works, but is already hard. And even so, the audience might be far away from the screen. So you have to use big text, obviously, and big animations. The advantage is you're right there with your computer. You have the clicker in your hand. The audio and what you're doing is timed perfectly because everything is right there. So you can use animations to support what you're saying. The tool you use, of course, is Keynote. It might be PowerPoint. we all know Keynote is better. When you're presenting remotely, there are a few differences. The first one is you won't get feedback. You will get no heckling, which is the good news, but you will also hear no laughs, which do support and help you when you do your presentation. You might be able to watch the chat, but I find it really hard to watch two windows at once while I'm presenting. So don't even try if that starts to distract you. You really have to learn to present to your screen at home, maybe your pet, if you have one. The good thing is, while we were rehearsing in our living room, that's exactly what we did. So it's just an extension of that, really. One advantage of presenting remotely is that the screen through which the audience sees your presentation are so much better than a projector can be. This is a slide that I took, or I made, for Jamf Nation User Conference last year, which was online. This was the template they gave us. These colors were in the template they gave us. These colors, I think, would never have worked on stage with a projector, but they actually work fairly well, and I kind of got to appreciate them in a remote presentation. I do want to point out, because it still annoys me several months later, that all this chrome around them. So, of course, Jamf has no problem or couldn't do anything about the YouTube chrome around the video that I'm watching, but then they put this frame around the actual slide deck, and then in the slide template that we worked with, there was another frame. So the effective space for the content that changes is about a quarter of the actual video. It still annoys me. I had to point it out. Aside from the colors, we can use subtler colors. We can highlight more things. You can also put more detail into the slides than I would be comfortable with on stage. So this slide, again, an example from my presentation at JNUC last year, has more information than I would be comfortable with on stage. And I think it works because people are watching this on high dev laptop screens, great contrast, and they will put themselves, if they're interested, at the right distance to the screen so they can read it. They can also pause, which is another thing you have to keep in mind. When you're presenting remotely, there will be latency. That means that the audio is prioritized over the video. That means if things happen the same time on my screen, they might be delayed at the viewer's end. So when you're timing your presentation with your animations, which is a good trick if you can do it on stage, that probably won't work as well when you're doing it remotely. Just keep that in mind. The frame rate over remote presentations can also be fairly poor. So if you use animations, make them slower so they can work. So we have eye contact screens, we can use them. The viewer will be sitting at the ideal distance to their screen. Use that. But keep in mind, if you're doing a live presentation, you will have poor latency and frame rate. You will be using Keynote and Teams and Zoom, and familiarize yourselves with them and practice often enough that even when you're nervous before the big presentation, you remember to check that share the audio button. There's one great trick that they added to Keynote just in the last year, probably as a reaction to the situation that we were all in, which is play in window. So you can also go in here and under the play menu, it's play in window, or you can add it to your toolbar. It's not there by default. And when you do that, you will actually get not full screen your presentation, but two windows. And the second window is your presenter preview, and the first window is the presentation. And you can just share that window through the remote viewing tool, which is what I'm doing right now, actually. You can configure the presentation view. There's a slide picker if you need to jump between slides quickly. And you can also configure if you see the current or the next slide. And since you're seeing the current slide in the big window, I think you can turn that off. But you can configure that in any way you want. So play in window, they added that fairly recently in Keynote, and I think it's a great addition. For your home setup, well, you probably want a Mac. Most of us will be using a MacBook with the built-in camera. The built-in cameras are okay. People complain that they're only 720p, but if you're transferring over some remote tool, yeah, you can see the difference, but it's not that horrible. What you want to do is you want to raise the Mac so that the camera is on eye level. So you want some kind of razor. You can use books. You want to power in. The new MacBooks based on the M1 chip have amazing battery life, but Murphy's Law will make sure that they drain during your presentation. So power up while you're presenting. You need a good microphone. The built-in microphones are getting better and better, but you want a good microphone. I have a blue Snowball that I bought a while ago, so it doesn't have to be a terribly expensive one. But here around, you will probably have some friends who are in the AV and what they recommend right now. You want to watch your lighting. You don't want to have the window behind you. You want to have front lighting. Doesn't have to be a fancy light. A desk light will do. Turn it on. This is kind of like the minimum. Everything from here is getting better and better. If you have an iPad with Sidecar can be an amazing second screen or third screen if you already have a second screen. If you can handle that information while you're presenting, iPad with Sidecar is a good thing. And I recommend using a clicker. I have the Logitech Spotlight, which I love, because if you touch your laptop or even your mouse while you're clicking, you will hear the sound over the microphone, and you might just move the camera a bit. Do a technical rehearsal, install the remote software, approve all of the privacy settings for your remote software. That is really, because you won't get the screen recording request until you actually attempt to share your screen. So do that. It has happened to me. I know these things because they have happened to me. Test audio in and out. Remember to check that one checkbox. And if you're using multiple screens, arrange your things and see how that works for you. The last option is pre-recorded. So we have the first two options. When we do pre-recorded, we kind of get the best of both worlds. We will present, the movie will run on a high contrast screen with the viewer at the ideal distance, ideal resolution. Even if the bandwidth is poor, the movie will download and they can all watch it at once. And we can use editing and effects and all of the things that the editing movie tools have for us in addition to Keynote. The downside is, yeah, it's going to be a bit more work. You suddenly have all of these tools at your disposal and you have to use them, or you don't have to use them, but when you use them, you have to learn how to deal with them. QuickTime Player, for example, for recording demos or for recording video as well as the slides. iMovie to put everything together, or if you have it and know how to use it, Final Cut Pro. You will probably want to start using pictures and movies taken on your iPhone, which is a great tool to enhance what you're doing. Then you have to deal with the Photos app. Maybe you use voice memos to record audio. And in the end, you'll have to transcode all of that into something useful. So a tool like FFmpeg or Handbrake. Keynote has a great way built in to record a presentation. So there's no toolbar for this, but I can click on Record Slideshow under the Play menu. This looks like my presenter mode, but I have the recording bar at the bottom. When you hit the recording button, it will give you a countdown, and then you will be in presenter mode, and it will record what you speak over the microphone and your mouse clicks to move through the presentation. It will record all of those together so it can later recreate the presentation. So right now, in my demo, I am recording what I'm doing, and it is remembering what I'm saying and how I'm clicking. When you're done, you just hit the record button again to stop, and you can kind of see it in the overview at the bottom, and the contrast is really poor even if it's not transmitting over Zoom. There are bars there that show where I clicked for the animations. You can scroll back and replay what you just did, and you can even go back in time and re-record over a certain segment. As soon as I start re-recording over a certain point, it will warn me because everything after that will be discarded. So you have to do everything after that point again. But now I'm just re-recording from that particular point. When you click the record button, that's one thing that I always fall into. Remember to move the mouse pointer away, because otherwise your mouse clicks will just start and stop the recording. It's one thing. When you're done recording, what you recorded will be stored within the keynote. And you can just play the recorded slideshow and will automatically play the audio and progress through the slideshow. So you could be starting this and standing next to your computer and the presentation runs fully automatically. Remember that, though, that the recording is stored in the keynote when you share the keynote. It makes the file much bigger, and you might not want everybody to see that. When you edit the slides after you've made a recording, you will get this dialog that says, you're changing the slides. This might put the recording out of sync with your slides. Are you sure you want to do this? It offers you to create a duplicate. I usually choose edit and then discard the recording afterwards because they're out of sync. The big thing here is that you can export the movie that you just recorded. It will show your slides as the video, and your audio will play everything, and you will get the animations. And you can get that as an MP4 video, which you can upload then to pretty much any video sharing system. If you've done that, you probably say, well, I want to record 2 streams or 2 videos at once. One with me through the camera and the other one with the slides. And then I want to switch back and forth between them or do picture in picture. And you can do that. And you actually can do that out of the box with just QuickTime Player and Keynote. You can also use iPhone and Keynote. The principle is the same. Set up your iPhone on a tripod, record yourself recording, and Keynote will record the presentation. There are third-party tools, and I want to highlight ScreenFlow because it's really good at doing this, especially if you have demos in between as well, not just slides. So to do this, and I did it here in the demo, I started up QuickTime Player, and I chose New Movie Recording. This will record from the built-in camera, or you can attach an external camera. Hi, it's me in the video. And then I switch to Keynote and also start a slideshow recording in Keynote. So at this point, I am recording my slideshow, and QuickTime is running in the background, also recording the camera of myself presenting the slideshow. You have to be aware of this. As you work through the slideshow, you do your recording, you do your mouse clicks, you progress. When you start it, you want to either clap your hands or snap your fingers to create an audio peak in both of the audio tracks of the videos you're recording at the same time. We will use that later to synchronize both of the movies to have the timing lined up. Otherwise, your mouth will move while the audio doesn't line up. So I'm working my way through the presentation here. I'm done. I ended the recording, and I'm going out. And in Keynote, I immediately choose to export as movie. I want the highest resolution. We can always downsize that later. And I'm saving this as demo slides. And then I go into QuickTime, which is still recording in the background of my camera, and save that as demo camera. Now I have 2 video screens recording me from different perspectives, one the slides and one me doing the thing. And then in iMovie, I can put those together. So I import the 2 videos I just created. And then I drag the slides first, because the slides will be your primary video. And see down here, there's the audio spike I got from snapping my fingers. And when I drag in the face camera, the audio spike is much farther because I started the recording much earlier. So I trim that, move it to the side, and then I zoom in so I can align the audio peaks. And that means now that the sound and the video is aligned on both tracks. Very simple. I got audio on both tracks, of course. I can mute one of them. In this case, I'm muting the QuickTime track. And from then on, I can have both streams, and I can move between the slides. Right now, if you look in the preview in iMovie, I'm only seeing my face. iMovie has several multi-track effects. In this case, I'm using picture-in-picture, And then I get the primary video in the background and the face, the secondary video, wherever I want. I can move it around. And now I have created picture-in-picture. And you can use all of the other iMovie features like editing out bloopers or pauses that are awkward. You can only show the face for a short time and then go back to the slides. You can do all of these things in iMovie now that you have those two streams aligned. So as I said earlier, this is what I've been doing and how I think I have been enhancing my slide decks and my presentations remotely, but I think it also pays off to see what others are doing, and I'm hugely impressed by that. Tim Perfett of Tucanu Software, he was a presenter yesterday. I couldn't watch it because of the time difference, but I'm so looking forward to that video. He has a YouTube channel, and he's been showing progress on his products, mostly MacDeploy stick, on that YouTube channel with, you know, medium short videos, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how long it takes. I like it. He always sits there with his lab coat, which is quirky and fun, but they're informative, a great way to show off your products. Ed Marczak at MacSysAdmin, which usually takes place in Gothenburg. Last year, MacSysAdmin was virtual, and they went for fully pre-recorded sessions, pretty much like Apple does at WWDC. And Ed Marczak took the idea of, we are inviting everybody into a living room for these kinds of remote presentations, very literally, and did an excellent presentation, filmed mostly, not entirely, in his living room. And there's also a document attached to that with resources, and in that document is a hidden link to a blooper reel, which I just can highly recommend. But the presentation itself is just wonderfully done, very brilliant. Of course, the big companies have been doing their presentations and keynotes and events online as well. Apple keynotes, obviously, commercially produced, very professional. Of course, they have very different resources than we would, but I still like watching them and think like, yeah, this seems well. How can I use this in my presentations? And apparently Tim Cook likes to walk around when he talks. So they always have Apple Park in the background, but others have copied this. Dean Hager at the Damned Nation user conference last year started his keynote by walking through Minneapolis, which of course had reference to what he was talking about. So it made sense. I liked it. Walking around. Maybe you can do something like that. You may not have Apple Park as your backdrop, but depending on where you live, you may have other options, like this tulip field. You can go outside where there's beautiful scenery, with canals and bridges. You can choose a medieval city as your backdrop. Or maybe a castle. There are other people as well, and they do this for a living all the time. They bring out videos weekly or even daily, and they earn their money with it. And of course, those are YouTubers and streamers, and maybe our generation is a bit too old to be fully into that. My son, who is a teenager, laughs at me right now. I can hear him in the background. But they are producing very informative, very great videos, and they're all basically 10 to 15-minute presentations. And I think we can learn from something like these on how to make engaging, fun presentations available over the internet. It's just an idea. The people I'm pointing out here is Rennie Ritchie, who has a great YouTube channel, as well as MKBHD. Rennie Ritchie is very Mac-centric. MKBHD is tech-centric in general. iJustine has been doing this for years, also very Mac-centric. And Joanna Stern is not on YouTube, but she produces videos on the Wall Street Journal, which I also very, very worth watching. So to come to an end, I don't think these three are very separate. I have mixed pre-recorded sections with mixed success, I guess. Today, I've tried that. I've wanted to try that for a long time. And I think I might be doing that as well, even if I return on stage for conferences. in some ways, I have already done pre-recorded demos for years on stage. So going a step further to fully pre-recorded videos, not that big of a step, not that big of a difference. And even in remote presentations, you can use pre-recorded sessions or the other way around. Doing keynote presentations and pre-recording them is basically the same as a live session, whether you're remote or on stage. I have put together a document. The links will also be somewhere on the website, I guess, but scriptingos10.com/macdeploy21. There's a bunch of links to resources, how-tos, tutorials, and all the videos and stuff that I showed. I will also link the video once it's online, and the slides and the PDF of the slides are there. Though the PDF of the slides would probably not help you very much because half of the deck was videos. But you can actually download the keynote presentation. My name is Armin Briegel. I am scripting OS 10 and all the social media, Twitter, Slack, and my website is scriptingos10.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Armin. That's wonderful. Armin's site, just plugging that, is fantastic. If you're an Apple admin, there is so much content there that can help you with just about whatever you can think of. So that was really great. Yeah, like I wish I would have had that before I started emceeing or started planning for emceeing, because it's just a great procedural way to kind of get through it all. Do we have any Slack questions? It's looking fairly quiet right now. I think we're all just stunned. That was fantastic. Anything else?
Well, I will be hanging out in the definitely the Slack, and I'll try the Kumo thing later as well. So if you have any questions or can think of them later, then I'm welcome. And as I said, scripting OS 10 in Slack, time difference, keep that in mind. But in your early morning hours, you can probably find me there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Armin. Okay. I guess we'll switch over to David then. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's fine. That just means we get a bit of a longer break coming after this. Welcome, David. How you doing?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through. I'm just going to run through the introduction. David, did you want to do Q&A before or after?
After.
Okay.
Let me see if I can share a screen. Host disabled participant. Okay, that's fine.
I'm just going to introduce you, so we'll fix that while I do that. So David Yoon's from Toronto. He's with HCS Technology Group. He's pardon me. So his presentation is on how to build your macOS VM for free. He's a subject matter expert for large enterprise, like I was saying, with HCS. He says, I quote, "I get paid to tear things down, fight with incumbents," we all know that, "and build better workspace for Apple fans." David's passionate about growing the Mac-brained YYZ, the meetup group for the Greater Toronto area. And David's favorite Apple product is the first-gen iPhone. It got him started on his journey. Did you want to say anything about that, David? Or
yeah, sure. We didn't have first-gen iPhone in Canada, so I had to smuggle it in from US.
Yeah.
And I ended up racking up, I think, about $20,000 data phone bill. I was a student at that time.
Oh man.
And it took me two hours with Fido, which was a carrier at the time, to get that credited or waived. Yeah. So that's an interesting story, which, iPhone really kind of got me started on this Apple journey.
Yeah.
And ever since then, haven't looked back. Also, now that we have learned how to present properly with Armin's presentation, you're going to see me make all the right mistakes.
Okay. Take it away, Dave. Thanks.
All right. So let me go ahead and share the presentation. Just let me know if you guys see it.
Yep, it's coming through.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining this early afternoon. The topic I'm going to cover today is how to create never run virtual machine snapshot with VMware Fusion Player. I know the title was a little bit clickbait-ish, but the real title is really just to create the snapshot, which is at the never run state. You can do that with both Fusion Player and Fusion Pro. I'm going to present as quickly as I can so that we have lots of time for questions at the end. Don't worry, a link to material covered in this presentation will be available to you at the end of this talk. Again, my name is David Yoon. I'm one of the professional services engineers at HCS Technology Group. I'm currently working also at one of Canada's major banks as an infrastructure consultant. One of my responsibilities is to help maintain their infrastructure required to manage all Apple devices as well as other mobile devices. Also, I also help organize MacAdmins community in Greater Toronto area in Canada. I am very active in some of the MacAdmins channel in Slack, but you could easily find me in #Toronto channel if you have any questions or concern. I'd like to say a couple things about HCS Technology Group, which I'm part of. We're trainers and engineers that mainly focus on delivering certified Apple training, such as macOS Support Essential, Jamf 200 and 300. As well, we deliver professional services on behalf of Apple and Jamf. Some of our guys are also MSP, and we are also part of Apple Consultant Network. So if your organization is in need of help with managing Apple devices, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, now to the main part of the presentation. Needless to say, remote work as a result of COVID-19 has presented some interesting IT challenges, mainly in the area of end-user computing. So as part of my talk, I want to touch on three major primary use cases that I can think of for utilizing virtual machines. So one is supporting user remotely. As you know, screen share, sometimes it's difficult, especially when you're interacting with the user. So you could use a virtual machine to kind of imagine what the users are seeing and also go through the process of instructing the user how to resolve the issue, right? So if you have something that where, things like, you need to uninstall, you would go through that motion in the virtual machine and then instruct the user as you're doing it yourself without, affecting your daily driver, right? Another one is if you're in engineering, you need to reproduce the issue when working with the vendor, right? So you can easily do that with the virtual machine, again, without compromising your daily driver. Finally, the one that I do, I use a virtual machine quite a bit for, which is development work, right? So specifically in the area of developing automated devices enrollment workflow, right? So, we call it zero-touch enrollment. This is when you enroll a device either manually or out of the box. Whether testing automated device enrollment workflow, testing app stability, or simply testing your automation scripts, it has always been our challenge to perform these tasks without, again, compromising our daily drivers. And yet, being able to repeatedly create and destroy our tests to confirm the correctness of our works is a key to success in managing Apple devices. Hence, leveraging the ephemeral nature of virtual machine becomes very useful. For training purposes, this presentation describes step-by-step process in creating a macOS Big Sur virtual machine using VMware Fusion Player, which is a free version. So please obtain the licensed copy of VMware Fusion Pro if you intend to use it, use this instruction outside of your personal use. Okay, let's get started. The requirement is you need a serial number of a Mac that is enrolled in Apple Business Manager, which is assigned to an MDM. Obviously, you need an MDM solution which supports automated device enrollment. A Mac with 16 gig of RAM, minimum of 100 gig of free hard drive space. I use macOS Big Sur 11.3.1 for this guide. So we can break the steps into 5 different sections. First, you need to download the full installer. It's fairly straightforward. Second, you need to download and install the Fusion Player. If you have a Fusion Pro, that's also great. And then third, install macOS Big Sur virtual machine. After you create the virtual machine, you're going to install macOS, and then at that point, we will learn how to create never run snapshot. Never run, never booted. It's basically a snapshot before the computer is turned on. The final step would be to test your, whatever that you're trying to test with the snapshot by playing the virtual machine. So first, downloading the virtual full installer is fairly straightforward. So if you are running macOS Big Sur 11 and up, you can run the software update command with 2 flags, fetch full installer, full installer version. I've tested, I created this guide with 11.3.1, but you can do so with 11.4. If you're running macOS Catalina, you could also use install macOS Python script, which is available in GitHub. All right. So once you have the full installer downloaded, it downloads to the applications folder. What you would do is you will need to download and install Fusion Player. So the link to get the Fusion Player is provided here. You also need a VMware account. All you need is your personal email address. You create the VMware account. If you're working with an organization that is a customer of VMware, you will be able to create a VMware account by providing the customer number. But for this guide, you could just create one with your email address. Once you create VMware account, you log into the portal, and then you are going to download both installer as well as the serial, the license key that is required for activation. Even though it's a free version, you still need to get the license key to activate the app. So now that you have the full installer and Fusion Player installed, we're going to create the virtual machine. So simply, launching the Fusion Player app in the applications folder, what we're going to do is we're going to create our first virtual machine. In the past, you would have had to go through some series of additional steps to create the virtual disk, the virtual image, the disk image, sorry. Typically, we would leverage something like Rich Troughton's script to convert the installer to the disk image, right? DMG as well as ISO disk image, and then you would utilize that with the VMware Fusion. But with the latest version, you actually don't need to do that. You could just drag and drop the installer right into the Fusion install window, and then the Fusion will take care of the rest. Interestingly enough, I actually just found out this method this past weekend, and I had to modify the guide all over again because I had the old method, and someone pointed out, yeah, you could just drag and drop. So, all right. So when you go through the creating the virtual machine, you go through the steps here. You can go ahead and click Customize Settings in step 2, and then you can name the virtual machine appropriately. usually, it would pre-populate and create the virtual machine as macOS 11.0. So I personally like to change it to the specific version that I download the installer. And then once you click save, the virtual the Fusion player will mount the disk image. It takes about a minute or so, and then you're off to a good start. Before you fire up the virtual machine, what you want to do is you want to make a couple of tweaks in the settings. So click the settings icon. You will be seeing the settings window. At this time, oh, what happened here? So at this time, okay, so this is one of those weird situations where my images are missing. Let's go focus on this setting. So here, what we're gonna do is we are going to making two changes. One is the processor memory, right? So you click on processor memory and increase the size to 8 GB minimum. I would recommend increasing that. If you do not do it and then later you play the virtual machine, you may see some weirdness when you during the setup process. So some instances where I've seen, you landed the desktop and you have a pre-staged enrollment package or bootstrap package that actually doesn't get downloaded for some reason. By increasing the virtual memory to 8 GB of RAM actually does make the virtual machine run smooth. If your computer is able to handle, you could also increase the processor to quad core as well from dual core. Another one that you want to do is you want to go to the network settings and disable the network adapter. That's very important because, as we know, with every Apple devices, upon setup, upon turning on the device for the very first time, the device will phone home, right? And it'll try to, verify the chain of custody and trying to connect with an MDM, so on and so forth. So you want to prevent that from happening, right? When the virtual machine reboots after the macOS is installed. So you want to disable that. So two things: change the memory, disable the network adapter. Now, now that you have made those settings changes, you're going to launch the player. And as you launch the player, I'm not sure why I have this weirdness where all my presentation is blank. So could you give me a little, could we pause for a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So I do apologize. I don't know what happened to my deck. So yeah, again, going back to the settings where you need to make the modification, right? So here is what you need to do. Change the memory to minimum of 8 GB of RAM, change the processor to quad core if you can, and disable the network, right? So when you get to play and launch the virtual machine for the first time, you get this little windows that says, hey, you want to click OK when sidechain mitigation enable prompts appear. So you basically say OK. And then your virtual machine will boot to recovery. At that time, it will actually, you're going to basically go ahead and install the macOS, right? So when you install the macOS, you just go through a couple of clicks here, and then eventually you will reboot to recovery. Once you will boot to the setup. Sorry. At the select the region window, what you want to do, this is very important, which is to shut down the virtual machine, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the Fusion menu, virtual machine menu, and then drop down to shutdown, right? Because what we want to do is we want to create the never run snapshot. Before we create the never run snapshot, what we want to do is we want to re-enable the network adapter, right? Because we want next time around, you want your macOS to reach out to Apple to, verify again, chain of custody, and then, your Mac will be connected to your MDM. Okay, and another thing that you want to do here at this point is, before you make the create the snapshot, you are going to go to, again, virtual machine list window, right-click your virtual machine, which will show your contextual menu. If you hold down the Option key, you will get an additional contextual menu. The one that you're looking for is Open Config File in Editor, right? So when the editor launches, you're going to see all the settings required for your virtual machines. You're going to scroll to the bottom of the list, and you're going to inject two items, right? One is hardware model, and the other one is a serial number. So if you have a serial number handy and it's enrolled to Apple Business Manager and it's pointed to your MDM, that's a serial number that you're going to use. You could also simply just use the serial number of the device that you're using. And as per hardware model, you could just use the one that's provided here, or if you want, you could also use your own hardware model as well by running the command in your terminal. sysctl hw.model will give you that information. So you basically substitute that information in the settings here. In the past, you may have required things like board ID, but you don't need that anymore. Make sure to save the edit and quit. So Command S for save, Command Q for quit. Once you quit out of the editor, you are going to go back to the list, and this time, right click, we're going to drop down to snapshots. In the snapshot window, you don't have a snapshot. You're only seeing current state, which you're going to now take the snapshot. So you right click and take the snapshot. And at that point, you're going to name your snapshot, whether never run, never boot, or beginning, what have you. At that point, snapshot is created. So you have a snapshot and you also have a current state, which is identical, right? So this is the part where you are going to, when you launch your virtual machine, it will start from the current state, and then it'll play, and then it'll go through a setup. But if you need to revert back to the snapshot, you always have that original never run state snapshot. All right, so after that, all you have left here is to test out your automated device enrollment with your virtual machine, right? So you double click the virtual machine, and if your device is enrolled in Apple Business Manager, you will eventually see the remote management screen. Okay. And let's say you've gone through all the tests and you want to revert back to the snapshot, you can do so, right? First, you want to shut down your snapshot or suspend it, right? And then right-click your virtual machine. Again, drop down to snapshot. We'll give you a snapshot window. When you right-click your never run snapshot, you have to be, please keep in mind that you will see two contextual menus. That's important. One is to restore the snapshot, and right below it is to delete the snapshot. Sometimes you may accidentally delete snapshot, so just be mindful of that. And if you do, you'll have to repeat this process all over again. It'll ask you if you want to save your current state. I personally don't save, right? Because I'm always, going back to the never run snapshot to rerun and retest the work that I've done in the MDM. But if you want to, you can save, and it'll create a fork of the snapshot. Now, if you want to use different serial number, right, all you have to do is restore the snapshot, and then go back to the editor, and then edit to a different serial number. So, yeah, basically that's it. Again, I do apologize for the little hiccup there. Hopefully, I hope everybody got all the contents okay with the website. Again, the presentation is really intended so that we can quickly cover the steps and why, cover why I do why you need to do certain steps, right? But the actual instruction is actually in our HCS website. So let me quickly just touch upon why I do it this way, because I think everybody uses virtual machine slightly different. Even the way you set up the virtual machine, you don't have to follow this method, right? I personally use this method because, as a consultant, if you're working with different customers, you are working with different devices, right? With different serial number that's enrolled to different Apple Business Manager, which is assigned to different MDM. So if you have their serial number and you want to test their enrollment workflow, all you need is the serial number to just plug it in and just play, right? And then you go back and then you repeat that process. So that is why I do not necessarily save the snapshot, right? If you're also working with the organization that actually has multiple MDM tenants, right? Because say you have development, QA, and production, right? You do all your development work in the development tenant, right? Configure all your enrollment, all your profiles, and all of the things required for management. And you want to test that, right? So you need either you would have a device and you'd have to change the assignment in the Apple Business Manager. In my case, I just have a dedicated serial number assigned to Dev MDM, QA MDM, and Production MDM, and all I need to do is just swap that serial number and play the virtual machine that way, right? So every time I basically transfer my work from Dev to QA to production, I would have to test and verify that everything that I copied over is correct, right? And so this is where the virtual machine comes in really handy, because plug in the serial number, play it, okay, everything looks good, revert back to snapshot, different serial number, play it, verify, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, David. We have many questions.
Okay.
So maybe we'll go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Before I start looking at the question, again, this is just how I do things, right? And I do like to ask everyone how you utilize your virtual machine and how you also set it up as well. So should we just go down the list?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take them, go ahead. We've got a couple of questions for the M1s, so we could probably.
Yeah. So the first question, I take it require an Intel Mac to virtual macOS. M1s need not apply. Yeah. So I don't think we have Fusion Player or Fusion Pro for M1s, right? So this is for Intel Mac only. Yeah.
I'm happy to read them out to you if you like to.
Sure. Yeah,
okay. So then Dave R from Slack asks, does the drag and drop install work with Catalina also?
Yes. So I wanted to verify, if this drag and drop method actually works for Catalina on a Catalina machine. So I verified that as well. Now I do have a version where you would leverage Rich Troughton's script So if somebody needs that, I do have that material available, right? Which is basically same thing. You install, you download the installer, and you run a Rich's script. You do need a modified version of his script. I have a fork version of it in my GitHub, where you need to modify the code so that macOS Big Sur 11.3 and on would work. So I do have that one, but from my testing, you're going to be able to run the Catalina virtual machine from both Catalina and Big Sur device.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you. Oh, that's an interesting question. Are there any differences with Apple Silicon hosts?
Well, right now there's only Intel, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for now, I don't think we have anything for M1 Max. I really wish that they would come up with that soon.
Yeah. A lot of places seem to be a little bit behind on that. Okay, Everett Allen asks, David, have you used this to teach something like MDM enrollment, where you can provide a VM for each student so they can complete exercises? If so, how would you get the settings and VM to the clients?
That's a great question. So now that we have this instruction, you can pretty much send that instruction and go, hey, get this set up on your virtual machine, and then you could probably run a demo off of your virtual machine as your students also have the virtual machine set up, because if it's for education purposes, personal use, you don't need to purchase the VMware Fusion Pro. I haven't done that, but that's a really, really great idea, actually.
Thanks, Everett. So I'm probably going to butcher this. Mateen Sasaluxanon asks, can this process be utilized for settings or for setting up never run for macOS 10.15 Catalina and macOS 10.14 Mojave images?
I haven't tested the Mojave image, but I know Catalina image is good. But again, with the old method, you can do Mojave, Catalina, and Big Sur. I'm pretty sure that you can create never run snapshot with the drag and drop method for Mojave as well.
Cool.
Yeah, but if somebody want to verify that and just shoot me a message, that'd be great too.
Thanks. And then we've got Selfstro and Min kind of ask a similar question about serial numbers. Does the serial number have to match the hardware model? It'd be nice to steal the serial from an old retired Mac, but install a current OS.
Yes, that's how I do it. I steal from, we have a device serial that's either gone missing or retired, right? But it is enrolled in Apple Business Manager. So you can use that serial number to create, Big Sur, Snapshot, Catalina, or Mojave. So I basically work with like list of serial numbers, right? And I know, it belongs to this particular MDM tenant, right? And so if I need it, I just pull it out, copy, paste it into the editor, and then just play it. That's how I do it. And the hardware model, it doesn't have to be associated to that serial number. You could basically use any hardware model by running that command and then plug that in.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, is that kind of why you turn off the network adapter? Or if you're can you run into problems with the serial number, especially using Apple enrollment or auto enrollment?
So what do you mean? If the serial number is associated to the Apple Business Manager, and that device is assigned to an MDM, and you run the virtual machine, then it'll go through the enrollment process, right? Right,
and you won't run into conflicts that there's two serial numbers with the same.
In the same
instance.
The question really is then around the MDM, right? Is MDM able to handle serial number that's identical, right? For Jamf, you don't have a problem. Sometimes you get into these weird random glitches. So what I personally do whenever I run these tests is that I just delete the device record from the MDM. So, I would have a daily driver, right, which is all enrolled in the MDM. And then when you start to run these, tests, you're going to see additional device records pop up because it's enrolled, right? It's a unique device, because with Jamf and, I think Workspace ONE as well, it doesn't, yes, it enrolls with the serial number, but there's also UUID, unique identifier. So it works off of that as well, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so for Workspace ONE, sometimes you get into weird glitch because the enrollment process is a little different, right? So generally you want to delete the device record that are stale, right? Then you wouldn't have a problem. Yeah, I've done device enrollment with the same serial number with Mojave virtual machine, Catalina virtual machine, Big Sur virtual machine, Appleseed, Beta virtual machine, all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's generally for most part it's okay.
Okay.
But again, got to delete those stale records.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time here, but Gyro J has a comment. I know you were talking about wanting to hear how other people do things. He says, I've done Mojave and Catalina and Big Sur. We use serial numbers from our dead MacBook Airs for VM and DEP MDM testing. So
yeah, that's exactly how I do it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah, the model identifier, M. Scott Blake says, in my experience, the model identifier is what limits the install. So cool. Thanks, guys. Anything else, David?
That's it. Thanks.
Okay. Remember to check out MacBrained YYZ. And they've got, I think, all sorts of resources there, all sorts of guides and that. YYZ, sorry, Anthony. And that'll be basically us going into break. We're going to go for about 25 minutes. So if y'all can come back at, I think that's 10:40. Yeah. You can all come back at 10:40 for Christina Gremillion and Tracey Joyce from Jamf. That'd be great. The Kumo space is in the Slack chat. So if you guys want to go in there and socialize, that's an option too. We'll see you back at 10:40. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks, David. Okay. Well, why don't we get started? So hopefully everyone had a wonderful break. We're back. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody here. So we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce both Christina and Tracey. They are doing a presentation, Yoga for Your MDM, using your MDM to support flexible and student-centered learning options. So Christina Gremillion is she has experience as a teacher, a school counselor, a principal, and instructional technologist. With half of those 22 years in K-12 education as an MDM admin and professional development trainer, she has since transitioned to a corporate role where she uses her experiences and grit to guide other educators and admins in finding solutions in their learning environments using Apple. In her spare time, Christina enjoys water, Pilates, and yoga. I'm not sure if it was water Pilates or water and Pilates, but she also loves listening.
Both are in the water.
Okay.
Girl.
Yeah. It's relaxing water. And she also loves gospel and neo soul. And then Tracey Joyce, wife, mother, teacher, dog lover, and a perpetual champion for women in tech. Tracey brings with her the verve and sassiness that comes with thriving through over 20 years in K-12 education, at least half of which focused on educational technology. Having recently transitioned to the corporate world, just like Christina, Tracey is excited to apply her passion for the classroom by helping to make life easier for teachers, students, parents, and administrators using Apple. When she's not jamping, Tracey can be found walking her dogs, biking with her son, or when the weather allows, working in the gardens. So Christina, Tracey, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, sorry, I don't want to roll over my cat. I just did before the break and she screamed at me. This is going to be an interactive presentation, everybody. So we're going to practice something. I want you all to, or not all of you, whoever's interested, raise your hands, use the raise hand button in Zoom. And when those hands goes up, Christina or Tracey will be calling on someone to interact with the presentation. So Anthony's got one. We've got 2 hands up in chat. If you need to find the raise hands button, I believe it is It should show up right in the bottom beside Q&A and between chat. Great. Thanks, everybody. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add about the interactive nature?
We will be asking people to also interact in the chat too. So, and actually we'll start off with a little interactive piece here. Since you did so great at introducing us and telling all of the bio kind of things, we thought we would give you a little bit more of a glimpse into who we are by way of 2 truths and a lie. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to tell you 3 things about me. One of them is a lie, and we'll see if anyone gets it right. So
before we begin, sorry to cut you off, Tracey. I know you're on a super roll here. Do we have chat turned off? Do we need to turn it on for everyone?
Could we please?
We probably can. Maurice, is that possible to do, or Min, just for this one? Which is wonderful.
Be able to do it.
Okay. Hold, please.
Yes, I just did. So.
Okay. Can we get some test chat? How's that working for everybody? Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Sorry, Tracey.
Alrighty.
Take it away.
Thanks. Okay. All right. So 3 things about me. Number 1, I have met Oprah Winfrey twice. Number 2, I have seen the Pope in person. Not sure which one of those is more important in my life. And number 3, I am a huge lover of jazz music. So which one is the lie? Number 3, I see Pope. Nobody loves jazz.
Love it.
Well, thank you all for playing along. Yes, I do not like jazz, but the other 2 things are actually true. And not today, but if you ever want to hear the story, I'd be happy to tell you, because they were both like pretty equally impressive in my life. So, but I'll turn it over to Christina.
Good morning, afternoon. I borrowed that from James. My 2 truths and a lie are, I'm the grandmother of 6. I was a cellist for 10 years. And I am the president of our local Toastmasters chapter. 2 truths and a lie. Not a grandma. Cello, grandma, cello. So they're going between the cello and the grandma. Well, when you are a blended family, it is possible for you to be the grandmother of 6. So I have 5 grandboys and 1 grandgirl who's actually a freshman in college. And yes, I did play the cello from 5th grade all the way up to sophomore in college. And when you're a physics major, you got to catch those classes when they come. So that's what made me put Tiffany, my cello, down. And I am not the president of the local Toastmasters group. So thank you for playing along with our little icebreaker, and feel free to play 2 truths and a lie. Tracey?
I wanted to point out though that the truth that both Christina and I have in common, besides so many other things, it's we're 2 peas in a pod for sure, is that we were both Jamf Pro admins, and we have both used it in our K-12 lives. And so we come to our corporate experience having that experience behind us. So when we are presenting, you know that we've lived the other side of this presentation as well. So,
yeah.
All right. So here's what we're going to cover today. Christina, take it away.
So our agenda is we're going to talk briefly about MDM, describe and show you some flexible learning environments. We're going to cover student-centered learning, exactly what that is and what that looks like, and look at some case studies.
And when we get to the case studies, that's when we're going to be asking for your input too, and asking you to share your experience with our different environments and what we have all been through in the last, year and a half, and what we have learned. Oops, excuse me. So we are assuming that everybody has a pretty good idea of what an MDM is. So we're not going to go over that part of it, but the point we're trying to make today is that your MDM should not be a slow cooker where you set it and forget it and don't spend a lot of time tinkering around. What we would like for you to think of your MDM as something that is a little more flexible, maybe not this flexible, but flexible in that it can meet your needs of your users. It can be limber, and it can be, it can reach out and really empower your end user to make the most of their learning environment, wherever that learning environment might be. So, some things that we're just going to highlight when we're talking about MDMs, some things that you might want to consider, or maybe you have considered them before, but deployment is, oh, I keep going backwards, sorry. Deployment is always a big one. So we're talking about, how are we getting these devices into the hands of teachers and students and staff, whoever is using them. And I think one really important thing that we learned in COVID is sometimes we need to make sure that those devices have eSIM or eSIM accessible. So we know that we need to provision them, hopefully through our MDM, so that they are devices that are ready to work outside of a Wi-Fi setting. And that is something that I think people were kind of scrambling and rushing to do at the beginning of COVID. And when we're talking about deployment, it's not just, hands-free deployment where we're just handing off a device to the student and they can log in, but we're also making sure that it has everything it needs so that that student can be, they can be doing their assignments right away. The other thing that I found very important is inventory. So in the environment that I worked in, we had both MacBooks, we had iMacs, we had iPads, all within our Jamf Pro, all within our MDM. And it was really helpful for me to see all of them in one place and to know what are students' devices, what are the teachers' devices, what are sitting over there in that lab, what do I need to access, what devices are suddenly now needing some kind of an upgrade. And being able to have that inventory with all of that detail in one place is really important. It was important for me, so. Alrighty.
With configurations in your MDM, depending on the MDM you choose, some configurations will allow you to set up the devices such that when they are placed in the hands of your end users, they are zero touch. It's a matter of turning them on and going through the swipes or the clicks, and they are ready to go. So configurations not only set up the devices, but once they are set up or prior to set up, restrictions can be put into place. And you have that flexibility, keyword there, to lock things down per the situation that's in place. The management controls are also something, or commands are also something that can be very advantageous to you. If you, who's all had the pesky passcode lockout, if your MDM has a management command setting where you can unlock it and using management commands, then that's going to be great for you. Also, the activation lock, instead of you waiting on Apple to unlock the device, you may have that at your fingertips. Also, you can deploy your apps using your MDM, especially if you have your Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager account set up. Please see your Apple system engineer or account representative to help you with that. But that's going to help you with some other things we'll talk about along the course of the presentation. This also, with the Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, allows you to purchase apps in volume, tax-free. It also allows you to scope these apps to the devices as you see fit.
That's great. Security and privacy, I think, is top of everyone's mind, and especially when we're talking about student data, there are a lot of things that we need to consider. So making sure that your MDM complements what Apple has already put in place for their existing security and privacy features is really an important consideration as well. And then what we're calling MDM empowered applications. So those are those apps that can be configured using your MDM that allow your end user to be a more empowered user. If you have something like self-service, that is something that allows the end user to be empowered themselves, whether it is finding the materials they need, maybe it's finding the staff handbook, maybe it is finding the app they need. But having that flexibility to service themselves is really a key advantage to having a flexible MDM. So student-centered learning. Go ahead, Christina.
So what exactly do we mean when we say student-centered learning? It means the students determine how, what, when, and where they learn. We had this.
Oh my goodness, sorry. I'm like happy fingers today. Sorry.
Need that clicker that Armin was talking about earlier.
We had this a little bit in our district prior to COVID, where we had, I'd say about 30% of our schools before we adopted an LMS in Google Classroom. And so there was that student-centered learning already in place. However, once we had the advent of COVID, we were all forced to, hey, we're either going to jump in or we're going to be left behind, and especially our students. So we did adopt an LMS, and that really opened the door for where we had to look at student-centered learning, how they were going to learn. Okay, Tracey's already talked about student access to the internet. If we didn't have hotspots available, then we had to look at student devices with cellular service as an option. Okay, if there were no access points in that area, we had to work with local stakeholders so that the students can access internet with public hotspots if they were available. What they learned, they didn't have to wait to get to math class because all the buildings were closed for a certain setting to work on that particular subject matter. There was an app put in place so that the student could annotate and solve that problem on a whiteboard, penultimate, explain everything. We had a single sign-on app. We used something called ClassLink so that everything was centrally located in that one app so that when they sign on to one, everything was signed into with that one set of credentials. When was no longer an option. Although the school bell is from most times 8 to 3, we had some students that had to wait on working parents to get home to help them. So there were no boundaries of walls and time. And where, even after COVID, we had students taking advantage of bus rides home because here we have schools that are located in rural as well as suburban areas. So they were car ride, bus ride assignments home where they had downloaded the information information and had it there on the device, and the device was robust enough to hold it. So student-centered learning is exactly what you see. It is how, what, when, and where. And with the power of your MDM, you could put parameters into place using configuration profile, app deployment to make that device exactly what your students need for your teachers to continue that learning.
Great. Now it doesn't want to go forward. I don't know if my computer is a little possessed. I don't know. When we're talking about flexible learning environments, we are really no longer talking about the one teacher, one classroom scenario. This is not what we're going at. We've got a lot of options, and we've learned that we have to make a lot of options work for our students. So the ones that we're going to be focusing on today involve a lab situation. So maybe you have 20 or 30 Macs or iPads in a lab type situation. A shared cart situation is another thing that both Christina and I have worked with in the past. We had both shared MacBooks and iPad carts. I know Christina had a lot of iPad carts. And those are shared between 2 or more classrooms, maybe even in the same day. And then a one-on-one type situation where students are assigned their own device, likely in a hybrid learning situation where, or in our example, we're talking about a hybrid situation where students will be at home or maybe not in the building, or have flexibility in where they are learning. All right, so we're gonna take a look. We're gonna dive into our 3 different scenarios, and this is where we kind of want you to be thinking about what you want to add to the conversation when it comes to these 3 different scenarios. So in the shared lab situation, we had a lab that was dedicated to our 3D printing program, and it had the CAD software on it. So when the students came in, they typically use it to design their projects. It was connected to our 3D printers or other things. We had other things, but I'm just going to stick with 3D printing for right now. And that was what that lab was typically used for. And then sometimes 3 times a year or so, we had to switch that lab on a dime, and all of a sudden it becomes a testing lab. And you can use your MDM to create that secured testing situation for you by sometimes you have apps that are already created for you that you can just deploy to those computers, and they have all the configurations already built for you. But you can also create them yourself. You can build your own assessment environment that can do the things that you want to do, like turning on the camera or turning off predictive typing or spell check, limiting websites, locking people into certain websites, and really create that testing mode. We would always put a customized wallpaper on our desktops as well that said, like, this device is set up for standardized testing. It's not available for student use right now. Please contact your teacher or something like that. And that way, in those situations where there isn't someone monitoring the lab at all times, they know, like, hey, this one is off limits. So that's kind of like the big scenario for our shared lab example. I mean, there's lots of other things that you can do, and I'm hoping that our brilliant hive mind out here will help us, learn from each other. Other things that we've done is organizing your doc in certain ways, or pushing out web clips that are really good. Like if you have little ones who, really just need to like push one button and get where they need to go, pushing out those web clips is a really good idea too. So I'm gonna pause right now and just ask if we can turn on the chat again and just see, or if anyone has questions. This is our time to just kind of talk about, what key learnings did you learn, or best practices, or items that you want to share, or questions. And we'll just kind of take a pause and monitor the chat and the Q&A and see what we come up with. We should have had like elevator music right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've got some lo-fi I want to use. So you can just raise your hand if you have a question. We have one already. Where is it? Nope, went up and went down. false alarm. I have a question. How did you guys segregate those devices when you were doing that? Was it just a smart group kind of thing, different policy? Did you use sites in Jamf?
Well, in my situation with the carts, they were already segregated into sites. And then within the sites, the smart groups were dependent on the school administration. Some administrators, we let them choose. So some administrators like them into grade level groups, and some of them like them organized into teacher or subject groups. And so each school campus had we call them an Apple champion who came in for a training. And so they knew how to facilitate the testing process, if we're talking about assessment, and how to check. The central office personnel pushed out that testing app, but so far as checking up on it, and I was about to get into that, we use the inventory feature that Tracey talked about earlier to check that dashboard, anything from battery levels to was that testing app updated. We checked on that on the Jamf Pro instance on that dashboard. We use those smart groups and smart searches to help us facilitate that process way ahead of time. And that's one thing that we were gonna highlight at the end. This is not something you do the night before. This is something you plan way ahead. Like we said, it's not a slow cooker type mindset that you set it and forget it. You want to put these things into place and start monitoring. So we would start, if testing window opened in April, we would do like a trial run for our champions like the last couple of weeks in March, so that they would get accustomed to checking that dashboard and checking those smart groups and checking those inventory items.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I'd love to point out too is, and I know that this is not an advertisement for Jamf School and by any means, but I know there are lots of other options that could maybe do similar. But one thing that I think is really powerful is in Jamf Teacher, you as the teacher can have control over what environment your students are getting to see. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the hybrid learning. I think that's a hybrid learning situation, but it really does empower the teacher. In this scenario, we're talking about configuration profiles that are mostly, sorry, my dog just became really needy.
It's all good.
In this scenario, that's something that IT would do, and IT is going to be really flexible and limber, and they're going to listen to their teachers, and they're going to, be able to, be willing to turn on a dime in our scenario here. But in lieu of that, we have those MDM empowered apps that allow the teacher to have control of that testing situation. So
cool, thank you. So just in the chat, we have Mike. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Oliva, had some questions yesterday too. But how did you lock down the Macs for testing? And how did you switch back and forth between the 3D printing mode and the test mode?
go ahead.
I'll take the first question.
Okay.
Locking the Macs down, we had a testing vendor where all those parameters were in the app. Data Recognition Corporation produced that app. And so once we deployed that app, it did the magic behind the scenes. So that was done in app, as Tracey mentioned earlier. Some of the testing vendors, it does it for you. And some of them we have to, write scripts or set policies to, lock it into that particular web page, or restrict apps using a configuration so that they don't open. They may show there, but they won't open. So that's one way to look at it. Go ahead, Tracey.
Yeah, and that just leads right into switching it. So if you had your 3D printing app scoped to the devices that are sitting in that lab, you would unscope that app, and then you would scope the configuration profile that you have set up with all the payloads and all the restrictions. And everything that, you know, creates that ideal testing situation for you, you would push that out to that set of lab computers so that it would be all ready for the testing environment.
Thank you.
Great, great questions. Yay, okay. Awkward pause. Anybody have any other questions? All right, we're going to move on to our hybrid learning scenario and the things that you want to be thinking of.
So in the hybrid learning situation, the first thing that we had to overcome, because you don't have all the students in front of you, is how to keep that line of communication open. With your MDM empowered apps, you could keep that line of communication open. Of course, hybrid means, as you see in the picture, you have some of the children there or students there in front of you, and then some of them are at home electing to do distance learning. You can use Apple Classroom to monitor the screens of the students that are there in front of you, but those that are at home, you would have to use one of those. You could use MDM empowered apps such as Jamf School, Teacher, and Student for the entire class to push lessons, lesson plans, as Tracey mentioned earlier, specific apps that are addressing today's learning. And what is so prescriptive about these apps is that it focuses the learning on the task at hand. If they're only working in the Desmos calculator app for pre-calc, then you scope that app and that app only, and whatever other learning resources that may be, you know, needed for that class, and that's all they have during that class session. It can be deployed by that class period and that class period only, or that teacher or subject area, so that you're not locking the device just for that particular time. So we see here the next point, it could be time and location based. All of that is set behind the scenes, and the student doesn't really feel it. They just look in their student app and they see that the resources are available. So again, that MDM empowered empowerment feature of Jamf Teacher, School, Student, and again, another piece of communication, the parent as well. There's a parent side of that where teachers can communicate with the parent, and the parent can continue to see what's going on with that student in that classroom, even though they're at home or coming back and forth to school. Another MDM empowerment app would be self-service. Whether that student is at home or at school, we have apps that you want the teacher, let's say, to access as needed. Then they can deploy those apps themselves from the self-service app. Let's say they only need Adobe Reader when they need it, and you've issued this device to them and didn't scope it automatically to install because every teacher in the district didn't need that app, but you had it available in self-service. There may be some documents that are needed, the employee handbook, the policy manual, new COVID guidelines. Well, save the email and just scope it out in self-service. And then it also has notification services as well. So there will be a little notification that'll pop up and says there's a new COVID guideline document there in self-service. So those are just a few examples of how the self-service, the empowerment of self-service works with the MDM. Also, app requests. How many times have you been in a situation where this has been me? I'm walking down the hall and, oh, could you please put ABC Mouse in for my first graders? They need it. Yes, sugar, but I was actually going down the hall to look at something, but I really need it. All right, could you please send me an email? Well, have no fear with Jamf Pro, and again, this is not a sales pitch, but I know this product because I used to be a Jamf Pro admin. I'm sure other MDMs have products similar, but you could put in a form where teachers could request just a simple Google form or Microsoft form, where they could request their apps, and that could go right there as a web clip on the device, or a form on the self-service side. Or if you're in Jamf School, guess what? Teachers can just request that right in the Jamf Teacher app, and that goes straight to whatever personnel that you designate gets the request. Usually that's who's the admin of your Jamf School instance. So that makes the app request process even easier, because it's just a matter of approving, getting the licenses and approving it, and it's there for the teachers to have, as well as deploy to their classrooms. So this empowerment piece was very valuable to us in the hybrid learning situation, because we couldn't see all the kids all the time for obvious reasons.
Yeah, great. That was excellent, Christina. And so this is where we're going to pause again and ask if people have any questions or ideas, best practices, things that you've used, or points that you would like to add to the conversation here. It looks like we covered it so well, Christina, that there's no questions and people are just stunned into silence, obviously. All right, let's move on to our shared cart situation, which is very familiar for both of us. And when we talk about that, we're talking about having, devices that are shared between classrooms, or possibly maybe they're in the media center. I spent some time as a media specialist where I had devices that were, always kept in our library in the media center, and they needed different things on them based on what students come in. Kindergartners don't need all of the access that the high schoolers did. And there are a couple of different ways to use your MDM to make those devices as useful as possible to the students. And if you're talking about, for example, Jamf Pro, you can have that self-service that's also available for the MacBooks. If you have, for example, in our situation, we had Jamf Teacher and Student. So we had Apple Classroom. We used that for a portion of it. And then using the Jamf Teacher and Student, we had those classroom management features like lessons and app lock and web lock and restrictions. And then you can create that shared iPad situation that has multiple users logging into it if you want in the iPad scenario. Or you could also take advantage of Jamf Setup and Reset if you have Jamf Pro. And that is, the scenario where it's really based on the user. So if a kindergartner comes in and says, hey, I'm in kindergarten, all of the apps they need are shown on the iPad, and then you can reset it so that when that high schooler comes in and maybe they are, they're using it for biology or chemistry or whatever it is, or maybe you have just a set of iPads in your science lab, you could say, all right, I'm here for biology. These are the apps I need. I'm going to reset it when I leave. And then the apps for, the next chemistry student would show up when they log in. So there's a lot of options and flexibility when it comes to creating that. What does the user need? Giving those students choice and giving them the power to display their learning in a way that is meaningful to them and best suits, their learning needs.
And in the EDU environment, shared cart was the bread and butter with those EDU budgets, whether it was title funds, funds, or, the benefactor that came out of nowhere. You could get a lot of bang for your buck with the shared cart using the power and flexibility of an MDM. As Tracey said, you could get a lot of usage from one card. Now we don't want to spread it too thin because it's like playing a tug of war. This 3 teachers, mine, but within reason, you could get a lot of bang for your buck between, let's say, the science and the math teacher. You could put everything that's needed and use, like she said, set and reset to show hide per user, or just create a shared experience using your MDM. So shared card was the life's blood, I know, in my EDU environment, because we were mixed. We were Microsoft and iOS, just a few macOS there, but that was the first mobile device that we had, and it went from 7,000 to 10,000 really quick. But when you have 38,000 students, you do the math. You've got to figure that out before the advent of I won't say the colorful little circle people. So anyway, please think about all of the little situations that you may have on your campuses or your colleagues have, and look at your MDM and the flexibility, as we've mentioned, with configuration profiles, with app deployment, with organization, with your even with the shared card. Let's say you're sharing that between the math and the science teacher. You can do something as simple as putting them in folders, putting all the math apps in a folder, putting all the science apps in a folder. That saves teachers and students minutes. And we know instructional minutes matter, so that they're not swiping or spotlighting, trying to type and search. Just simple things like that can build up to a great workflow to get the best use of your shared card.
I think too, Christina, besides again, the hundreds of other things we've bonded about, but having both been on the teacher side of it, working in classrooms, and then understanding how the tech works behind the scenes, having those conversations with the teachers is so important in helping them be empowered to do what they need to do, and then they in turn can create that learning, the optimal learning situation for their students. And that's really what everybody is. That's the end game. That's the goal. And I think that for some teachers, I know even in my situation, there were teachers who didn't know that there was flexibility. They just thought they had to conform to whatever was already set up. And so I hope if there's something, good that comes out of our, the struggles that we've gone through in COVID, is that we can create that flexible learning environment and that student-centered learning situation that will make the learning environment much more impactful for all of our end users.
True. And it's not just a lock them down situation. That is not the only function of your MDM.
Right. So again, we'll pause. Yeah.
Any teachable moments from the Brain Trust out there, or any questions regarding shared card?
Yeah, we've got a question from Slack from L. Lauren. Tracey, how was your dog so calm during the presentation? Mine jumped all over me as soon as the stream started, and I was only watching.
Well, it's about to thunderstorm here, I think. I don't know. They said thunderstorms today, so that's the reason why she's needy, is because and her name is Rainy, which is very ironic, but she absolutely detests the rain. So, yeah.
So not going to do yoga with Christina.
Right.
And he says, hello, Rainy. Okay. Any other questions? We've still got 4 minutes, so you can ply them with your questions. if you like to. I do have one, and it's very specific. I don't know if it's appropriate for this. So you just tell me if it's not. You were talking about activation lock, and I just started figuring out how to manage activation lock through Jamf today. Yeah, do they have to be, if you want to use activation lock or like unlock a device, do they have to be, what's the phrase? Supervised. And what does that entail?
That would be an answer for way beyond 4 minutes. It's not complicated. I like to talk to that person. And if it's you.
Oh, it's me.
Okay, yeah. I like to have a side conversation, but yes, to answer your question, it would need to be supervised. And I'd like to explain the difference between managed and supervised.
Sweet. Cool, we'll catch up after.
Yes.
Nice, thanks.
But it's beautiful to be able to do that and not have to turn them into Apple, even though they work very quickly now. It's like 72-hour turnaround, but it's wonderful to just click that button and get what
just
you need.
Unlock it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Talking Moose says, best lesson I learned in EDU work. Don't lock them down. Don't disengage students from wanting to use whatever device. So you want to encourage that ownership. That's kind of Apple's model, right?
Yay.
Voice. Yep.
I like that. Who said that?
Talking Moose in the Slack.
Oh,
love it.
Moose.
Yeah, he's got a
Love
dewlap
you.
and everything. I have no idea.
So
Okay.
Give you one takeaway. Use your MDM to maximize the flexibility of your student learning and empower those educators, as Tracey said earlier. They can be your biggest advocate. No offense, this was a phrase from one of my IT colleagues. The IT gods will have to give some of their power, let it trickle down, because they can be your best friends because they are right there in the trenches and they know what they need. So use that MDM to empower them with the tools that they need to keep that learning going. Tracey?
You summed it up beautifully. Yay.
Yay. Thanks, guys.
Great.
Or ladies, I should say. I'm sorry. That was wonderful. It was really great to have you. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was.
Have a great day. Okay. So we've got a little bit of time between now and Ben Tom's, about 3 minutes. Anthony he wants to skip it for now. We'll do that.
No, let's do it now.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
It's slip, not skip. So I'm just gonna.
Yeah, we'll just switch you to Spotlight.
Yeah. So while the presentation was going from Christina and Tracey, and as you know, even though they were very excellent at being platform agnostic in their talk, they are Jamf employees. We got them recruited as speakers, plus Molly Riguel from yesterday, through the courtesy of one of our former conference speakers here, Andrina Kelly. And so while these ladies were presenting, Andrina announced that, good for us, she's returning to Canada with her husband Ian, and good for them. She'll still be working for Jamf, but setting up some kind of a Jamf presence in Canada. So I know that Andrina. I approached Andrina to speak this year, and she said, "Yeah, I can't do it around that time frame, but here, let me reach out internally and see if there are others, in our community, particularly they have a wonderful diversity channel type group in Jamf." And she reached out to that, and that's how we got those 3 speakers. And I really want to thank Andrina. She's a great friend of MacDeployment, and looking forward to having her back in Canada. And since Tracey and Christina are still on, if you wanted to add something, happy to have any contributions you have to sing Andrina's praises, because it's pretty easy to do that, isn't it?
Yes, it sure is. She was very helpful and very supportive in our whole process. And in giving context, Christina and I are fairly new employees. Like I started in January and Christina started in February. So when we stepped up to present, Andrina like just took us under her wing and really encouraged us. And she's just phenomenal. And when I heard that she was moving, I thought, oh no, because I actually live in Minneapolis, or in the Minneapolis area where she was located, but she said, don't worry, we're just going back to Canada and we're still going to be part of Jam. So really nice. It has been an excellent career opportunity for me to get the chance to work with her. And I'm sure Christina echoes that.
Yes, I'm going to keep my commentary and enthusiasm contained. Insider. You know, they both used to work for Apple. So I'm going to keep all that in. And I'm just going to say thank you, Andrina, for sponsoring Tracey and I and Molly and giving us this opportunity. You have been awesome. And I know I couldn't have done it without you. So I want to say thank you. And thank you, Ian, for loaning us Andrina.
Okay, Anthony, is that all you wanted to get out there? Wonderful. Thanks, Tracey and Christina. It was great to have you. Next up, we've got Ben Toms. He is from DataJar in the United Kingdom. I believe he's doing this after or before dinner. So thank you for being flexible, Ben. The talk is Administering Apple Silicon. Ben Toms, also known as MacMule, has been managing Apple devices since before the last processor transition, so quite some time. Throughout, he's been involved with the wider Apple admins community, and he's now the head of innovation and platform at DataJar. So really excited to see what you got for us. Also, his favorite device was the iPhone. I spoiled it. I just wrecked the joke. Just because it's a convergence device, pardon me. So I see you got some guitars there. That's a nice collection.
Yeah, thanks. I've had interesting responses to my office. This is actually where I've been working for 5 years. Some folks have been on Zoom gone, oh, bless, you're in the cupboard. No, this is my
no, it's garage.
Yeah.
It's a step up, right?
Yeah, it's a little shed attached to the side of the house that I tend to do my work and play my dirty metal. And yeah, the family normally out there playing out away and stuff. So yeah, it's cool.
Right. So you've got a video for us, and you're going to be answering Q&A during or after?
During I'm here, I might as well type and respond as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, take it away.
Hi there, my name is Ben Toms. I'm the head of innovation platform at DataJar. You might also know me as MacMule. You can find me at macmule.com, as MacMule in the Mac Admin Slack, or at MacMule blog on Twitter. Today's talk in part came from a talk that I gave in March titled macOS, Big Sur and Apple Silicon. And you can find the link to that talk, as well as links to any articles, any items I've mentioned during this talk within this GitHub repo, which is datajar/MacDeployment 2021. For today, we're going to focus on the Apple Silicon side of things, and specifically the items that might trip us up for those of us who manage Apple's devices. So again, the administration of these Apple Silicon devices is what we're going to be focusing on. Several areas that we're going to be looking at. I'm not going to read these all out for you now, but we will be stepping through these in sections in an order. Some of these items will be one slide long. Some of these items will be quite a few more. So let's get going. First of all, back in summer, Apple announced they'd be changing the format of its serial numbers. Way back in 2010, Apple went from a 11-character serial to a 12-character serial. Now, the thing that's always been available, that's been kind of an issue or been helpful maybe, depending on which side of things you're on with this, with these serial numbers, is that they've always been able to ascertain some details of the device. You know, when it was manufactured, the year, the week, and what model the device was. These are these kind of things that maybe were potentially bothersome to legal or from a security point of view, because if you start to disseminate some of these things, get an idea of when an organization ordered devices, potentially what type, you know, where they've been shipped from, etc., you might be able to start to build out a serial number, and then you could use that to enroll into their MDM via the deployment program, formerly known as DEP, which is now called ADE. Now, part of that is as good a time as any to actually point out this white paper from the folks over at Duo, which talks about how you're going to secure your ADE enrollment. Since this came out in 2018, we can now secure much more than just the basic auth side. We can now use SAML and those different types of authentications, allowing multi-factor auth to make sure that if someone has a serial, they need to have credentials, multi-factor auth, etc., to proceed further in. But it's still a consideration. It's still something to worry about if you're enrolled in if you're on a device of IDE. And these new serial numbers have started to appear already. Folks who have got iMacs, the new colourful iMacs coming in, have already started to see these numbers change, as well as some of the mobile devices. With the new Apple Silicon, we can also, with our Apple computers, we can also run iOS and iPadOS apps on those Apple computers themselves now. How does this work? Well, if we go to the App Store and search for an app that's not available on macOS, you can see here, for example, we're looking at Among Us, it's not showing, but if there's a tab there now underneath the results, which is iPhone and iPad apps. Click in there, you can see that Among Us is there because I've installed the app and I've run it under my Apple ID, which is the same Apple ID I've logged into my Mac with. Now, this isn't like an opt-in type thing or an opt-out type thing, but essentially developers can say, do you know what, our apps that we've got for mobile aren't suitable for macOS, or we do not want them available for macOS. So at DataJar, we do have iPhone apps, we do have iPadOS apps, but we are not making them available to macOS because we have a separate macOS app that does that. Slightly different functionality, different item, it wouldn't make sense. However, if you do download and install one of these apps, what you then see is a smaller window when the app launches. It's not going to be your full screen, it's going to be a bit smaller. It's based around maybe the device it supports. And when it comes to navigating and using these, you actually find there's some differences here as well. Now, I think over time you get used to these. I personally haven't really got used to these types of controls. But you can see they're there as well. It's not quite the simple point and click. But then again, you've gone from a touch device to keyboard and mouse or trackpad. When you look at the actual apps on disk, the structure of the app bundle is quite different. Normally within here you have like contents, an info P list. It's quite a different structure here. But this is how these files, these app bundles now look on disk once they're installed. And it's worth bearing in mind that the structure might be different. If you're running scripts that are going to be reading and expecting the info P list to be in a certain area, this might trip up your system, but also the fact that when you're inventorying devices, when you're grabbing application data from or what's installed in your devices, these apps might well appear as well. So for the example here we're showing is Among Us, is showing in Jamf Pro. It could well be that there's an app that's available for mobile devices as well as computers that you might have licensing against. So you might say, oh, you can't have X app installed, but it turns out someone might well actually have the mobile version. So it's worth bearing in mind if you're in an environment that's very tight on keeping on top of its licensing and who's got what installed. Another item is Rosetta 2. Now, what Rosetta 2 does, it enables a Mac with Apple Silicon to use apps built for a Mac with an Intel processor. And here's a KB that would be for end users. If you're trying to open an app and the app wants to install Rosetta or needs Rosetta to be installed because it's an Intel only app, how to install that, as well as how to set it for an application itself manually to open up in Rosetta, which can be handy for troubleshooting. Now, loads of us admins, there's actually going to be a good chance that we're going to need to install Rosetta on all of our devices. Rich Trown has a great blog post here about how to do this, and he also links out to Graham Gilbert's method to do this as well. This is something that I will expect us admins having to do for a period of time now. And there's reasons for this. You might look at something from a vendor that says, hey, these apps work natively, they're going to be great, they're going to work fine on the on your Apple Silicon devices. However, when it comes to installing them, you might find there's other challenges. Now, as always, we have a Darren Wallace blog here, and the as always part is the fact that there's Adobe content here, which is really helpful. The example here is the fact that back in March, Adobe amended the admin console so that when you create a package within the Adobe admin console, you can specify if it's to be installed on Intel or Apple Silicon. Now, regardless of what the payload is, it would need to be installed on one of those two platforms, or either or those platforms. If you try and install the Intel package on a Silicon device, regardless of Rosetta, it will fail. However, the fun part here is the fact that this could be a Apple Silicon package, but with an Intel or a non-universal payload. So you still might need Rosetta to actually run the app that you're installing that needs silicon, which is a bit convoluted, I know. Armin Briegel also has a great blog post on this as well, in a similar fashion. We're talking about distribution packages. And distribution packages, you would specify the architecture type that the package supports. What does this mean? Again, you might have a package that installs a universal or Apple Silicon item in the payload, but actually the package needs Rosetta to actually run the install process. Now, Apple have also updated the product build documentation to advise on changes they made within this. So if you're running product build on macOS Big Sur, then it should support both architectures. And this is really what's going to be affecting those distribution packages, which aren't that common, but still, without you auditing every single package you've got, reaching out to every vendor that you work with on this, you might well, the simplest way to proceed might well be just to install Rosetta for now. And then over time, work towards getting these things all ironed out and moved away. It could well be that these folks that you're working with have created this Rosetta app, but actually their build process, or their packaging process is on an older macOS, and therefore it isn't going to have these architectures being supported. Again, pointing towards the blog post shown from Armin, there's steps on there on how to kind of add the different architectures, as well as this man package within Big Sur. Okay, Apple Configurator 2. So similar with the other two devices, with Apple Configurator 2, we can revive or restore an Apple Silicon device. However, how you do this depends on the device that you're looking to restore. So Apple, this whole KB is talking about the different methods you do this, different buttons you press, different key combinations, and it's filled out with these lovely images at the end, which is probably one of my ugliest slides, but probably one of the most informative, to show you where the cables actually need to be plugged in physically, as well as that merry dance of different buttons and key combos, etc., to initiate this process. However, once you've committed the muscle memory, once you've put the time in and you've got this up and running, using Configurator to rapidly reprovision a device is great. It will be done in like 8-10 minutes, and the device will be ready to go through your ADE process again. And really is that quick. Obviously, the thing that you'll have there is the first time you run the process, you need to cache the OS. So a brand new OS coming out that first time might be a bit longer, but afterwards it's just going to churn through and be much, much quicker for you. We do still have macOS recovery though. Within the Platform Securities Guide, Apple detailed different boot modes within Apple Silicon. And they do mention in here that we don't just have the recovery OS, we have a fallback recovery OS. Now, the recovery OS is accessed via holding the power button from the device being off. And the fallback is from double pressing the power button from the device being off and then holding it. Also within the macOS Big Sur guide, Apple have an article here where they talk about the different options available when you're in recovery. So I think it's really handy for us as admins, how to reinstall the OS, which is reinstalls it over the top, again keeping the user's files and settings intact, as well as the erase and reinstall. There's a nice process now that's quite slick, really. Within this is also details around setting a security policy, which we're going to talk about in a second, or in next few steps, as well as using the share disk feature. Now, with these new processors comes new firmware, which gives us new features. One of these new features is unified login. So I'm going to talk through this video of this. So here we are, we're looking at basically your standard 5-volt screen, the screen that we've known since 5-volt 2 has been around, really. Generally non-customizable. We can't do anything with this window, it's quite limited, it's just the list of users. However, with unified login, that window should reflect the settings that we have within our login options. But if we check here, in users and groups, unlock and click on login options, you'll see that we're setting name and password, but we're setting them via profile, hence them being grayed out. Might not be too easy to see on the video, but that's kind of what's happening here. So unfortunately, whilst unified login is a thing, it doesn't support those the profiles payloads for this. So instead, what you can do is use the sudo defaults right and write out the setting for the conda Apple login window with the show full name key and set the Boolean value of true, and then disk-util AP update preboot. When you next restart the machine and log in, what you should then see after you made that change is a username and password box. So again, it's a bit of a shame that we can't use a profile for this currently. Raise feedbacks, reach out to your Apple reps about that if you want to make a change. But we should be able to get to this name and password window. And the other cool thing around the fact that this firmware change and these are different options available also means that we can, things like VoiceOver are now supported over the login window file preboot, as well as things like smart cards, etc. And with this change, something has to give as well. You know, give and take all the time. So firmware passwords simply not supported or not a feature as such on Apple Silicon. So in this article here, Apple say, hey, turn on firewall. There's actually something that's a bit more nuanced around this, because obviously us who enable firmware passwords, or we're enabling firmware passwords, are to stop devices from being booted externally, from to external volumes, as external volumes, and a few other options like that. However, still kind of covered with this. Now, this here is under this banner of what is called ownership or volume ownership. Within the Apple Platform Security Guide, there's loads of kind of really in-depth detail around this. And you find loads more acronyms. You know, owner identity key is the OIK. The user identity key is the UIK. The user identity certificate is the UCRT. Basic Attestation Authority, BAA. You know, it goes really, really well in depth in here, as well as about how it will hand off the ownership between operating systems when, say, you're booting to another OS on a partition disk. Within here, though, there is one paragraph that's quite handy and helped in my head to kind of straighten why this is a thing and what kind of the rationale behind this. For a Mac with Apple Silicon, local security policy control has been delegated to an application running in the secure enclave. This software can utilize the user's credentials and the boot mode of the primary CPU to determine who can change the security policy and from what boot environment. This helps prevent malicious software from using these security policy controls against the user by downgrading them to gain more privileges. So for this, it's a method to stop a random app or a random process creating a user account and then changing the boot security of your device and therefore lowering the security of your Mac. Also, the fact that it can utilize the user's credentials and it then determines who can change. It means that there's actually a bit of authorization stuff going on there, which is a bit different to what we've seen before. So how do you become a volume owner? What does it do? Essentially, from what I've seen, from what I've looked at from here, accounts that have interactively logged into the Mac are the accounts that would be volume owners. So if you log into the login window with an account, you should become a volume volume owner. If you use the login command from terminal to log an account in, that should become a volume owner as well. It's about having this interactive login, and the login command, you have to pass your credentials through in plain text, etc. So it's up to you and your workflows, your security practices. Is this something that you wish to look to do or to roll out as a process or not? But it looks like they're the methods by which you become a volume owner. And what does it give you? Well, it gives you the ability to change boot policy security. If we break that down, things such as it'll give you the ability to install an OS partition, to boot from an external disk, to enable Mac sharing mode, and to make changes to the startup security policy. Again, from what I've seen, this looks like you would also need to be an administrator. So accounts that have interactive logged in and are administrators will then be able to make those changes to the right. I'm going to show you some examples now. We're going to go through some of these different scenarios. Very much, if this stuff's all really key to your security posturing or some of the items that you use with macOS, and you're mourning the loss of firmware passwords, please give these things a go. To start off with, we're going to look at the startup security policy. Again, available within the various guides out there from Apple. There are three main settings within the of security policies within macOS. You've got the full security, which behaves like iOS and iPadOS. Only allows booting from software that is known to be the latest. Reduced security allows us to run older versions. And it's also the reduced level is also a level that's required for supporting booting kernel extensions. Permissive. This policy level allows users that are building, signing, and booting their own new kernels and stuff like that. So you're actually going to most of the time as administrators, we're actually mostly going to be running reduced security, and I'll try and explain why in a sec. So in order to make these changes, we need to boot the machine into recovery, so that's holding down the power button. From here, when it loads up, we need to now authenticate as a volume owner who's also an admin. So we have my account here. So I need to authenticate. And from here, if I click on Utilities and start up Security Utility. Now, because my disk has been encrypted, I now need to go in here and unlock the disk as well. And now we can view the security policy. So this is currently full security, but you'll also see on there you've got reduced security. Now with the reduced security, if you're enrolled into an MDM, you should actually find that bottom box there is going to be checked. So you're in full security, but the MDM is configured so that it allows, it's allowed then to remotely manage kernel extensions and automatic software updates to your device. And this is where the MDM is using its bootstrap token in order to achieve and do these items. So it's a bit bizarre. You will be between that. You will be between full security and reduced, but that's generally where most devices, especially devices that ADE enrolled into most modern MDMs, will actually sit. So now let's look at system extensions, or kernel extensions, or legacy system extensions, and or system extensions. It really depends on what document you read and where on this. You can kind of call them the same thing at times, but they're also quite different. And calling them this and having this as a subject header didn't really fit very nicely with the slides. So hey, system extensions is. Now kernel extensions are still a thing on KEX with Apple Silicon, but there's different ways of approving them depending on the way in which you're enrolled into an MDM. And Apple again have detail of this, and this link is again linked in the GitHub page. But the option at the bottom there, the automated device enrollment, where it says MDM solutions can manage this automatically, that is the functionality that's enabled by that checkbox we saw a moment ago. It starts security being checked. And this is another thing that's worth bearing in mind. Whenever the set of approved kernel extensions changes, or either after initial approval or the version is updated, a restart is required. So if you install a kernel extension, or if you reinstall or if you install a new version of a kernel extension, then a restart is going to be required. Depending on your MDM, and this is an example from Jamf, you could trigger this. You could trigger the restart. Jamf have an API endpoint you can use that will restart the device, and it will rebuild the kernel cache, so which basically makes those changes needed, not just from a standard restart. Rebuilding the kernel cache when it does the restart will also remove those KEX prompts because it will load the KEX as needed type of thing. And you can notify the user with a little persistent notification that says you need to restart. Again, items here in the general requirements: a bootstrap token is required for Jamf Pro. It's to be described within Jamf Pro, as well as the allow remote management of kernel extensions and automatic software updates. Option to be enabled in startup security. With a current version of Jamf Pro, current being 10.29, it's been a couple of releases since. I don't know exactly when this was enabled. Oh, there you go, it says 10.28, sorry, at the top of the page. This should all be the default when you ADE your mobile device. What happens if you update a kernel extension on a device without going through this process? Well, the user will probably receive a prompt here like this. The app advising it needs them to go into system preferences, security and privacy in order to allow the extension to load. And then within this, it depends on the kernel extension payload. You can actually have there's actually an option there to allow non-admins to approve. In this instance, it's not set, so someone would have to authenticate, to unlock the preference pane to then click the allow button. Regardless of this, with the allow button clicked, the person would then need to restart. So if, again, you require kernel extensions to be installed as part of your security posturing, etc., this is a workflow to test and work with. Even similarly with system extensions, there are challenges around that, how that does work. For example, installing, you still need to do a restart on many occasions. Uninstalling, you'll need to do a restart. It can be quite disruptive, so if these are things that you're having to use, please give these a test and figure out workflows, and obviously great communication for your end users. Now, booting external startup disks. There's a blog post that came up recently at the time of recording from Howard Oakley, and gives another example here of volume ownership, where you're trying to boot to an external volume, but there isn't any authorized users as such within the pre-boot sequence or being recorded as such to say that you're allowed to do this. So you'd have to authorize via credentials of a known user on that volume. But this is how you can kind of boot to external media. And now we have Mac sharing mode. Now, Mac sharing mode is the replacement for target disk mode. With Mac sharing mode, it's SMB connectivity over a Thunderbolt or USB cable, not not disk, not like an external disk as it was before. To enable, again, you go into recovery, and I'll show you this now. We'll skip that slide for a sec. So you'd boot the machine into recovery, click on options again at boot picker. And then from within here, we would need to unlock again as a volume owner who happens to be an admin as well. And then if we click on utilities at the top of the screen, and then share disk. Again, we're going to need to unlock the volume if it's disk encrypted. And then we click start sharing. Now the volume should show on under the connected Mac under network as a share that you can connect to, and you can connect to as a guest. One of the big changes with this, because this is SMB and it's not file level, it's not like a disk, this does mean that you can't ASR restore to it. So is imaging dead? Yes, yes, yes. We've seen on here we can quickly provision devices using Configurator 2. We've got the recovery and the fallback recovery to also reprovision from Apple or via your caching servers. And now here we can see that yes, we can target disk mode, well, as such as Mac sharing mode obviously is now called. However, this does not give you the same level of functionality as target disk mode because it's not an external disk, it's SMB, so therefore you can't ASR restore to it. So yes, please, imaging's dead. ADE, work with those workflows. This is the way forward. And I think the drum's thoroughly beaten. I expect nobody listening to this will be shocked by this, but yeah, it's gone. Kind of talking about things that have gone as well. So this is the last section here. I'm talking about MDM lock. Now, when I did this talk back in March, the security platform guide for England, Gremillion, was only a PDF. Downloading the PDF, which I've unfortunately misplaced now, on the page here, it said that remote lock isn't available for a Mac with Apple Silicon. Remote lock, when you look at the platform security guide now that's fully online, it's a term that's not used a great deal. It's mainly activation lock. There's like 2 references for remote lock, and none of it in this sentence here has now disappeared. However, locking an MDM locking a device is really not an option for an Apple Silicon device. I'll give you some examples. So here we are, we're logged into a machine, the user's reading a fantastic blog, the data jar blog, which is obviously amazing, and we lock the device. The device goes back to recovery. This is something we've seen before. We've skipped boot picker, we've just gone straight to recovery though. And again, a volume owner who's an admin from within here can now activate the machine. If they restart, they're going to restart back into the OS. So if part of your process of when someone leaves your organization is the fact that you want to lock a device and to ship it back, maybe there's some legal hold requirements around that, you might need to look at actually a DLP solution or something that backs up the data, makes a copy of it somewhere, etc. The alternative with this right now, kind of been advised, would be potentially to reset the person's password before you send the lock command, and some MDMs allow you to reset the user accounts under certain conditions, etc. But there might be a method by which change their password, lock the machine, then yes, the machine's in that step there. However, what happens if we then decide to do it? Now my account here, who was a volume owner a moment ago, I've now made it a standard account. And if you want to test this, by the way, demote an account and run that update preboot command that we saw earlier with the unified login, and then run these test processes. But here we are. trying to activate. Nothing's really happening on the machine, but it fails to create the request. And I don't really have any options apart from start, restart, or erase. So if the machine hasn't got any volume owners who are admins, the option you might have here is actually the only option the end user might present with is to erase the device. So if your goal here is to protect the contents of the disk for reasons, again, you need to look at alternatives here. And essentially, just really don't use the MDM lock command. If you have workflows that need this, you need to go through and find alternatives. Speak to your MDM vendor. This is something that I think we shouldn't be able to do on Apple Silicon devices, and not get ourselves tied up in these issues. But it's something that's worth calling out. It isn't supported. Again, currently, who knows? Soon. And I'm not going to make you wait the hour and 25 minutes for this. Now, again, here's the link to our talk notes. So there's every section, every header section. There's links within there to pertinent items as well. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you found it informative. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're going to take a break. We'll see you back at 7. Thanks so much for your time, everyone.
Mention YouTube.
Oh, and YouTube. That's right. The YouTube link should be in the Slack. It's pinned in there. And if someone could throw it in the chat for all of our attendees, that'd be wonderful. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.